Hello everyone, this is FIDE Master Victor Neustroyev. Thank you for coming. Today we are going to talk about a refusal of queen exchanges. When to refuse to exchange the queens and actually why. So which are these conditions that tell us that we shouldn't exchange the queens, instead we should keep them on the board and take advantage of that fact. Okay, well, I hope everything works perfectly well. People are joining. This is a workshop. I slightly changed the format of our event. What does it mean? Well, just a little. Well, I decided to not provide you with homework. Instead, we will focus on these tasks during the class. Because I realized there is just a very little feedback regarding the homework. Thanks to John, who always actually sends the answer. Yeah, but other people do it quite rare. So that's why no homework. We will talk about it during the class. This position is taken from our previous webinar where we were talking about. So who remember what was our previous topic? By the way, can you also let me know if the quality is good or not? So our previous topic was converting small advantage. Thanks, John. Yes, and well, yeah, let's just go through it. Let's just go through this one and discuss that homework. So there was a solution sent by John. Let me read it. So here John suggests playing h4. Wait, not in this position. We were so a few moves were played. Rook goes to c5, and here John suggested h4. Let me see how h4 works. Then rook takes h5, and then white can centralize the king with this move. Then g5, let's say, for black to open the position and exchange more pawns. Take with the f pawn. Knight goes to d5, and this knight is potentially coming to c7. So knight d5. Oh, yeah, let me make this move on the board actually to illustrate it. So h4, rook takes, king e4, then g5, take. Knight goes to d5, white centralizes his pieces. So white is definitely ahead, the position is winning. Then rook h1 can be played, but let's say knight d5, rook h6, king goes to d4, king goes to g7, king c5, king f7. And this is where white is ahead. Yes, they are ahead because they want to do something like that and invade the enemy territory. As for the pawn on a6, it can be attacked with the king. So it can be this, and then this. And the pawn will be captured. Yeah, so it does make sense. But h4, I doubt rook h5 will be played. What if they play king h6 to capture it with the king? Then you still have to play the move that was played in the game. So the move that was played in the game was actually b4. And I want you to tell me why b4. So what does this move do? Why it's so strong? There are two reasons of playing b4 here. Who can tell me? So Peter says that a b4 stops a5. Yeah, this is how you fix the pawn structure on the queen side. This is one reason. What is the second reason?
The second reason is that it attacks the rook.
Well, so you gain a tempo. Well, yes, you do gain a tempo, but it's not so important here. The second reason is that it allows our knight to occupy c5 and attack the pawn on a6 from that. square. So c5 is a strong point. I would say it's an outpost. It closes the c file as well as attacks here. So, and after h4, the rook is blocked. Well, the rook has a 5 square. I think they are going to take on h5 with the king. Anyway, so rook h5. Rook h5. h4 fixes the king. Right. King g6. King d4. Rook f5. Trying to improve the rook. Then what? King goes to e4. Rook goes to h5 back. But knight d5. So the idea originally was correct, but this knight goes to c7 to attack this. So king f7 and knight goes there. Now, in order to defend a6, they decided to play rook h6. So a6 is defended indirectly because of this discovered attack. That's why white doesn't take, but moves his king further. However, then g5, and it's quite similar to what John suggested. But John suggested playing this strategy without before. On the one hand, it's, well, it doesn't allow us to go that way. On the other hand, well, we can just play bishop d6 and still take there. H takes, king goes to c5, king goes to e7. Could we play better here? Well, probably. How? Well, this move. I like this move. But the problem of this move is rook f6, and this is a weakness. So you can, of course, capture on a6. They can capture on f2. And then you take there. And then your two pawns are stronger than the enemy one on g5. And even if you sacrifice the bishop here, for that pawn on g5, well, once it goes to g3, your knight and two pawns guarantee a winning position. So bishop d6 leads to a simple winning plan. King c5 was played instead, king e7, knight d5, king goes there, and this is where I asked if knight c7 is possible to be played again. Well, let me check. So John answered no. If knight c7, he thought that it's this, and then black wins the knight. Well, black doesn't win the knight. Instead, black exchanges his rook for two minor pieces. But when you decide to initiate such exchange, you should calculate this pawn endgame. Is this pawn endgame winning or not? Brian thinks it's a draw. Why you say so, Brian? Okay, there is a good point from Praful Kumar. Yes, you should play f3, right? Both sides have a reserve tempi. I'm just reading the comment. So, okay, so fine. Okay, so Brian thinks it's a draw because both players have reserve tempi. But wait a sec, Brian. Don't you think that the king just captures this pawn and that's it? It's definitely winning for white. This king is into the enemy territory. If, let's say, we had a position when this pawn was on g7 and this pawn was on g6, and it was black to move, yes, it can be a draw. King d7, and we keep a position. But this is a far advanced pawn, and the king can capture it. So king f5. Now if g4, the king goes there and captures it. Or maybe to f5, doesn't matter. That's why they bring the king and hope to go there. But f3, forcing the king to go away. And now white is faster. So king d7, king f5, and this pawn decides the game. If you play that move, then this, they go there, and it's actually still a winning position. So king b4, this, a5, well, it's too late to play such a move. Okay, maybe it should be, no, you cannot play e5. So if you let's say in this position, decide to play a5, or maybe here you decide to play a5, it's too late. At the very least, they can capture on a5, and after b4 continue with this. They promote faster, and as well as they promote with a check. But even this promotion with a check allows us to win the game, even without another pawn. So the pawn in game is completely winning, and mainly because the white king is far advanced into the enemy territory and can capture this pawn, and then a distant, an outside pass pawn decides the game. So that's why rook c6 can be played, but after king d5, they have to play something else. And because of that, g4 was played. But g4 allows us to attack this pawn with our king. So king goes there. Can they play rook c3 move and win our pawn there? Yes, they can. But in such a case, they drop the pawn on a6. So actually, the rook is stuck. It has to stay on the 6th rank. Once it goes there, it's king f5. And they have to bring the rook back to defend a6. But in such a case, they sacrifice the pawn on g4. So rook c3 attacking this. Okay, fine. But knight a6. Rook takes a3. What do you think? How to continue? Because the knight is under attack and we don't want to lose the pawn on b4. Back to c7. Yeah, back to c7 makes sense. But then rook b3. Because knight b5, they take knight d4. I still think it's winning, but it's hard. However, you can play this move. But instead, it does make sense to play knight b8. This is a check. The king has to go there to not fall under other checks. And you defended your knight. Now you can just capture this pawn with your king. He cannot capture this pawn. And once you take the b pawn, you can advance it, or you can just move the king away and attack g4. So that's why they didn't play rook c3. They played this move to bring the king to b7 and protect it with their king. King f5. King goes there, king g4. Now rook goes to c3. So they threaten here. What should we do? Well, activate our knight, which this time goes to c5. Now rook a3, bishop c7. Well, why bishop c7? This pawn doesn't require any defense by this bishop, but this pawn requires. Doing this means that it will be under attack. And we also use the c5 square for our knight. That's why bishop c7, they cannot attack our knight. King c6 was played, and bishop a5. Now it's protected. It looks like we located our bishop to a passive position, but at the same time, it works really well. The bishop here stops the pawn, and this knight goes to c5. So rook a2, attacking, f4, king d5, knight c5 works. In the game, it was played knight g5. So with bishop and pawn, we are able to stop this, and our king, pawn, and knight are going to play on that side, so we are going to promote. Knight goes there, check, king f5. Rook a2 back, king goes there. So what do you think black should play in this position? It seems like a completely losing position for them, because if, let's say, they try to play something like this, then we push. And if now they decide to come closer with the king to attack and prevent us from playing this move, well, we can chase the king away with bishop c7 and then push again, come closer with the king and promote. While our bishop can be always stay on a5 or get to a5 at the very last moment once someone of the enemy pieces attack our pawn on b4. So that's why we have to calculate rook a5. That's exactly correct. So Brian and Shehin, You're absolutely right. It's rook a5. But whether rook a5 works or not, so rook a5, pawn takes a5, and b4. It seems to not work because we can bring the knight in time. So rook a5, pawn takes, b4, f5, b3, knight f3. So b2, we go there. So, and with our knight, we are able to stop the pawn. Could he play anything else? Maybe with the king? No. Why? Because king c4, king e4 are checks, and then we can sacrifice our knight for the pawn on b3 and simply promote our f pawn much faster than he captures on a5 and starts pushing the a6 pawn. So that's why b2. Knight goes there to stop it, and the king comes closer. But f6, king goes there, and knight b1. That's it. So what happens then? He goes there. What should we play in this position? Who can tell me? So one move is this. The other move is this. Okay, so, well, if I were playing, I would prefer this. Why? Because after king b3, I play this, king a3, this is a check, and the position becomes winning. If the king goes somewhere else, we can play this move. So the king is forced to go to a2. And then you can come closer with your queen. So with whether queen f7 or just queen f2, he goes there, you can play queen d4. He goes there, you play this move, and every time the king goes to b1 and blocks his pawn with his own king, you make a move and come closer with your king. So this is the so-called staircase maneuver because you do a kind of a staircase moves with the queen. So here, for example, king d2, they threaten to promote. You play this move, they have to defend with king c1. You play this move, forcing the king to go there. And then you have another temper to move the king closer to the place of action. King a2, they threaten to promote. So let's do what? Let's play this move. If king a3, we block. So king a1 is a must. Then this. And king d3. So now it's actually over because when they play this move, we do not need to continue checking him. We can checkmate with queen c2. This is how the game ended. Well, f7 would work too. King b1, f8. Now they have to play king e2. It's basically the same position with a different move order just. Okay, fine. So this is how White was able to convert his advantage. And the key idea was to play b4 to fix the pawn structure and provide this knight with a strong point on c5. And later the bishop with that perfect position on a5, from which the bishop would stop the pawn, the a pawn, and defend it on b4. Okay, fine. Let's talk about our topic today. And this is the first position that I would like to discuss. However, before we start, what can I say? Well, when you play the game, we can divide all positions into just two categories. One is with the queens on the board, and the second one is without queens. It can be the end game or doesn't really matter. Whether there are a lot of other pieces left on the board and you just exchange the queens, or you exchange the queens and a lot of other pieces, so it's a complete endgame. Well, having or not having the queens on the board affect the strategy of both players. Usually, we would love to exchange the queens when we are ahead in material, or our king is in a danger or can be in a danger, or the position contains a lot of tactics, and by simplifying it, by doing a lot of exchanges, including queen exchanges, we make it more simple and reduce the number of potential threats that we can blunder. What can you say about this position? Black has extra bishop. However, there is a compensation of 3 pawns for that bishop. Well, black is definitely ahead, and if they exchange the queens, they are still ahead. But well, this time, should we exchange or not? It's really sharp. And white, with his last move, queen d4, threatens to checkmate, threatens to take on c4, as well as threatens our queen. So queen d4 is a must. Should we exchange the queens? Okay, so let's wait. Let's wait, and I wanna see more answers, and also please some explanation why you choose this or that move. So let's think. Also, by the way, guys, who attend this web workshop for the first time, can you please let me know what's your ELO is? It can be a FIDE rating or just chess.com or your national rating, for example, USCF. Well, okay, let me start. Yeah, thanks. Uh, let me start explaining here. Well, yes, we can exchange the queens, but queen d4, rook d4, then the bishop retreats. And what then? So yes, black is ahead, and if you turn the engine on, it says, yes, black is completely winning. But I tried to play this position against my students, and very often, well, I was playing with white pieces, very often I was able to achieve a draw from here. It's not because I played strong, but because just exchanging the pawns provide black with very little chances to win the game. So, okay, Peter, can you answer about queen d3 move? I didn't understand. You mean d4, so you mean exchange or what? Queen d6 maybe? Okay, so bishop g7 here, well, yes, why not? Oh, bishop g7, they probably play e5 because the pawn becomes poisoned. Okay, so yes, it's possible, and you are technically winning, but in practice, you can hardly realize this advantage because
Okay,
they just need to exchange your pawns. Okay, yes, Peter.
here, queen to d3.
Queen to
D.
d6
Oh
and
no, e6. He's okay. E6.
e6. E6 makes sense actually.
Oh no, but if you move the queen to b6, you can take it. I was thinking, all right, how about queen to
d6. This is a
how
blunder.
about just
So
queen to
e6.
b5? Queen to
b5 is an interesting move. Yes, let's talk about it. As for queen e6 move, well, fine, but maybe queen a7. This is a double attack. Okay. Uh, queen d7, bishop g7. Why not bishop g7 instead of queen trade? Well, okay. What we expect them to play here? They can exchange the queens. What else they can do? They can play queen d7, but queen d7 is just a check. Yeah, I think they're gonna play this move. It's better than taking on d4. I agree, but it still seems to be approximately, well, it's still winning. Yeah, bishop g7 is better than queen d4, but the problem is still the same. They can try to exchange their pawns for your pawns. So, for example, here I would say maybe this, sacrificing but pushing to e5. And I still think that you cannot take it. If you take it, I play this, f6, and knight e4, threatening to take and then capture on e5. well, king f7, let's say, then knight g5, and so not sure if it's a winning position. You can take on h2, of course, take on g5. So 2 versus 3 and 2 rooks on the board. Okay. So instead, here, well, queen d4 is definitely good, but white decides to keep the queens on the board. And if you turn engine on, the engine says exchange. However, from a human point of view, both kings are compromised, and with the queen on b5, which covers d7, as well as put pressure on b3, so you're ready to sacrifice your pieces on b3, you are likely to get more practical chances to convert your advantage into a winning position. You may blunder something too, but keep an eye on it. Well, I don't know. I probably would play queen b5 to keep the queens on the board, because if I cover d7, I don't have to worry about anything else, and this attack looks really strong. Okay, let's continue. So rook d2. This is how the game continues. Okay, queen c7. Why queen c7 isn't so good? Queen c7 isn't good because you're not threatening to take on b3. If let's say they play, well, yeah, they can play rook d2 and then you're not threatening. Well, it does make sense too, but having the queen on b5 is better because you add extra pressure on b3. Then rook d2, bishop h6, attacking it. There is a check, but it's a useless check, just king e7, and no more checks can be played while the queen and the rook are simultaneously under attack. Rook goes to g2. So the key idea of that rook was to protect the second rank. Bishop goes to f4. So at some point we want to take, and if they take with a rook, we can not exchange. We're gonna take on b3 and succeed with our attack much faster. Well, doing rook d1 here could make sense. And if so, how would you continue? Well, f5, I don't see the point. You only expose your king. So bishop e5, yes, take on b3 or bishop e5 right away. Yeah, probably bishop e5 or take on b3 first. I don't think there is a big difference. Queen e3, take, and take with a bishop. So if they take with their queen, we can win this queen, let's say by doing queen e4. What if they take with a pawn? How should we continue? Because exchanging, capturing on b3 and exchanging the queens this time doesn't favor us. There is no checkmate, and what can we win? The second pawn, and then try to play for a win, but the number of pawns is equal. Bishop e2, what do you mean, bishop e2? Queen a4, a1. Yeah, queen a4, exactly. With rook b3 as well as queen a1 threat. Exactly, this is correct. And if they play this move, which almost defends the position, so this, and b3 is well defended. And b3 is well defended at the moment, actually. Then which move do we have to play? Bishop b2, king takes, check, knight blocks, right? Okay, maybe here they can play better. Maybe they take the queen. What do you think about this move? Well, you can take the queen too, actually. This, yes, and you up a rook. Yes, it works too. Yes, but instead you can just capture on h2 right away, because if now they take the queen, it's a simple game over. So where do they move? If here it's checkmate. If they move to a1, it's a checkmate with rook a2 and rook a1. It's the simplest way. So that's why rook h2 works. You cannot block. If knight e2, let's say, you can here you have to capture on b2. The king takes, you take there first, and then you take on b3, winning the game. So king here and there. Well, if this move, then, well, at least you see you can win a queen here, but I want to check if there is anything better. Yeah, there is. So this, he goes there, you do this, not letting him to go out. And after king c1, you can checkmate with what? This, 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 this. Right. Okay. There is a checkmate in 2 moves? No, in 4. Queen a1, king d2, queen c3. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Thanks. So rook d1 doesn't work. So that's why they play d5. Now what? A takes b3. Well, this is a threat. Then queen b1. It's a winning position. It's even a checkmate. So a takes b3 and bishop takes b3. Again, they have to take this bishop. What else they can do? Because bishop a2 or bishop c2 is coming. If you block, it's bishop a2. And you take the queen. If this move, then queen b3 decides the game. How does it work? This is actually what happened in the game. And at this moment, white resigned. Why? Well, moving the king is a disaster. Blocking with the rook doesn't make sense too. Who can tell me why? So queen takes, rook takes, king takes, bishop f5 first, and after the king moves, bishop g3, and we win a piece. So then rook h2, it's over. Right. So let's take a look at this original position. Well, white has some threats, but you can parry them with your queen moves, such as queen e6, queen b5, and queen c7. Well, queen b5 is considered a little better because you put more pressure on b3 and a sacrifice is coming. Or you can exchange the queens. You can exchange the queens with queen d4 or bishop g7 move. Here, it does make sense to keep the queens on the board because queen takes d4, rook takes d4 is technically winning, but you have only a few pawns, and if you allow white to exchange it, then what? How do you win? So practically, you may not win. So that's why, from a practical point of view, it does make sense to play queen b5 or something like that and continue the attack. Because with 2 bishops and the queen is on the board, the enemy king will be in a danger. Your king is in a danger too, but it looks like with your pieces, you are able to cover all the squares around from which this king can be attacked. What else? So here, if you turn the engine on, the engine says bishop g7 or queen d4. These are the strongest moves. Why? Because with fewer pieces on the board, the engine can calculate deep enough. But with queen b5, with the queens on the board, there are many more possible moves to consider. That's why the engine will calculate at the depth of maybe 24 or 32, 34 moves, and will tell you that this move is not so attractive because, yes, while black has advantage, but it's not so huge that it can be after, let's say, 60 moves in the endgame without queens. So that's why here it makes sense to more base your decision on your feelings, like how you can checkmate the enemy king and whether your attack and your winning opportunities are stronger with queens on the board, comparing to that end game from, for example, after bishop g7 and bishop takes e5, where you have only few pawns and you can hardly create a passed pawn. Fine, let's continue with our next example. So it was Mark Dvoretsky played with black pieces. So Mark Dvoretsky was a famous author. He wrote a book devoted to the endgame. So I'm not sure if it's the most popular book devoted to the endgames in chess. So he was international master, right? So he was a famous strategist, and he was known of his endgame technique. What do you think white should play in this position? So right now there is no queen exchange on the board, so you have a chance to play something else. Well, it's black to move. Well, we are analyzing this position for black, so black has to play. While you're thinking, let me tell you something else. So when you see that your strategy is based on the enemy king's weakness and on the threats that you create to the enemy king, then keeping the queens on the board, it looks good. But, well, if the king is fine, then maybe you'd better pass the game to the end game. Also, if, for example, you are a weaker side and you don't have advantage, so you are almost losing or your opponent has advantage, then keeping the queens on the board will provide you with some potential chances. The position becomes more complicated with queens and your opponent is likely to make a mistake. Also, with queens on the board, you have potentially you have a chance to deliver a perpetual check and draw the game then. So knight g4 is interesting move. Okay. Rook h2. Fine. Maybe queen b7, king g1, and then rook h2. What do you think? Because just right away, rook h2, I don't see the point. Let's talk about it. Rook h2, then you said rook checks, so king g1. And how do you win here? If you want to play this move, I will block with f3. So did this attack cost a rook? Maybe you could, well, and now queen b4 is coming, so this is a problem. If you decide to play knight g4, I think they just exchange the queens. You can then win exchange. Okay, and maybe even win a pawn. Actually, more than a pawn. 96, so 97 also works. Okay, so white is winning here. That's why rook h2 is too optimistic. If you play rook h2, king takes knight g4, well, king g1. And what then? Queen b7 first, and then maybe knight g4, or knight g4 right away. Well, knight g4 right away, I think doesn't make sense. Well, let's say they play h3. How do you continue? If you do this, this is what you can do actually, right? Because if f3, then knight e3. Okay, I got the point. Okay, if so, they can play queen b4. Queen b4, queen takes b4, knight takes b4, and then what? If you take here, I can play rook h1. Maybe it makes sense to capture with a rook, but king goes there. So knight e5, king here. Well, I don't see that black is winning here. That's why I wouldn't play so. Well, another logical way to play is, well, rook a h8. Well, it's still a queen exchange. You take the pawn on h2, and I don't know. Well, queen b7 looks natural, right? Because if, let's say, king g1, we can capture on h2. And if they capture back, we bring the rook, and it's checkmate. Right, but they cannot take. They can instead continue with this move, exchange the queens, and even if you decide to double, you are not threatening with checkmate. For example, the game may continue with something like that. So check, king escapes. Maybe here they can play f3. That's true, but f3, knight d5, and knight goes there as well as b4 is protected. So that's why. So queen here, king goes there. That's why queen b7 doesn't look so promising. Yeah, so in that variation with the black's rook invasion, it's not possible to cover the f3 square. Queen d4. Okay, queen d4, I think they can capture on b4 right away. So this. How do you continue? They can keep checking you, and if you, well, how you have to play there, but this is a fork. You can exchange the queens, but actually they have this and they take there. So no, queen d4 is not playable. Yeah, so knight d5. So this time, black sees that once he plays this move and then sacrifices the rook on h2 or does something else, there will be a queen exchange, and with a queen being exchanged, the black's attacking potential is almost over. That's why he first defends on b4 and prevents this exchange. At the same time, puts this knight out of the place of action. If it doesn't go to b4, what else it can do? Rook a1. Rook goes there to put pressure here. So they push. And what do you think how to continue? So here I would say that the white pieces are discoordinated. And this is what you can take advantage of. Queen b7. Queen b7 makes sense, but this time queen b7, it's f3. And 93 is f3 no longer works. 93 no longer works. So queen b7, f3. So you create a threat, they defend, this square is covered. You can go back with your queen to defend it with something else, but well, maybe they can just ignore it. So 93, rook takes e3, queen takes e3, queen b4. So because they're gonna take this pawn, and I don't see a direct attack here. So king f6, let's say, I can bring the knight back. Maybe you can take there. King h3. And I'm about to exchange the queens. So that's the problem. So that's why you can already take advantage of your queen activity and sacrifice on h4. At the moment, they don't have a chance to exchange the queens. Well, the other suggestion was knight f4 move, but well, then what? Queen b7, f3. Rook g8, king escapes. So maybe this, f3, then you do that, then the king escapes here, or even to f2 is fine. Then you have a perpetual check, maybe. So queen b6, king. No, king e2 loses, rook e3. King e2 loses because of this rook invasion. Oh, let me show you. This, rook g2, king d1, queen d4, king c1, and quick checkmate. So rook h4 was played. So g takes h4. What else? Well, it's possible to play this move, but this is absolutely losing endgame. So you can continue with rook h1, but I think it's better to play rook h2. So takes, king takes, queen checks, and then queen takes e1, and you win another pawn. So rook h4, g takes h4. And there is a direct attack. So you can start with rook g8. Now, moving the king to f3 doesn't help. We can talk about it. In the game, it was king h3 move. But actually, you can calculate this attack really well. If the king goes to to these squares, then it's isolated from the other army, and all you need is to capture this pawn. So, for example, king h1. Here, you definitely play queen d4, and I don't see what can stop you from playing queen h4. Ah, f4 can. Okay, then queen d3, and it's the same, but here. So if king f3, which makes more sense, then this move, and you are threatening with checkmate here, as well as with this move and with this move. These are not checkmates, but very, very close. Well, king h2, queen d4 still, and if f4, it's queen d3, because you're threatening with, no, not queen d3. After f4, you have to deliver a check, right? And then go to g2. And if, well, king h3, I'm going to show later. So king f3, it's still queen d4. Checkmate with queen g4, how to defend? Rook g1, let's say. How can you continue? Queen f4, or you can take the rook, and then what? Take. Then then queen d3. Yes, you can take. Then you can play this move. If he goes there, I think it's a quick checkmate. With what? With knight f6. With knight f6. If he goes there, it's e5. And once he takes, it's queen e4. So that's why he has to go there. But this is also a quick checkmate. Queen d3 right away. Yeah, queen d3 here. Queen d3 right away makes more sense, but then he blocks and you have to make a move and then capture this rook. It's still a winning position, but I wanted to find a forced checkmate. So king f3 loses. That's why in the game it was played king h3. Queen d4. Now you're threatening with this. f4 again fails. You check here and go there and then checkmate like that. So they have to cover this. If they try playing this move, what would you continue? Still queen d3? Well, queen d3, rook g3. Knight f4, yes. Can get the knight to the game. So he goes there, then it's queen f2. Right, thank you. So instead, queen d1 is the only option to protect there and to keep this rook on f1 protecting f2. But it still fails, knight f4. So the king goes there, and what we need is to attack this. How can we do it? Just with this move or with this move. Nothing can stop us from taking there, so only such sacrifices like that. Both moves are blunders. So these tactics with queen b7 was attractive, but wasn't effective. That's why we should avoid a queen exchange, and because these pieces are stuck on the other side of the board, but our queen has a potential to go to the king side and attack the king, let's defend against the queen exchange and continue our attack. This looks logical. Even if you are a super expert in the end games, it's better to play the middle game if you see that your position has a very strong attacking potential. Okay, so let's talk about this position. What do you think about it? White to move, So should white exchange? And how much white is better here? Is white winning or not? What happens if there is an exchange? And if not to exchange the queens, then what? Just stay and wait, or avoid an exchange and move the queen away? So in other words, I would ask you, I'm asking you what you would do with white, and please explain why. So just try not to guess the move, but provide your own explanation, because this is how I will understand the way you are thinking. So white has a slightly better kingside pawn structure. Good point. Well, but I don't see that you can create a passed pawn on the king side. Yeah, this is the threat. Rook e4. So here there are, to be honest, two reasons to not exchange the queens. Okay, so Zamfir thinks to change the queens and get the king forward on light squares. Georgios suggests queen c2. Interesting. Queen c2 puts pressure on c6, so maybe you can, no, you cannot. Then there is an exchange of the queens and you lose a pawn. But yeah, this move makes some sense. Okay, let's first talk about the suggestion of Zamfir regarding the exchange. Then what? King moves using the light squares. But what do you think black should do? Can black now play for a win? G6? What's the purpose of G6 to prevent the king's invasion? Well, you can play G6 later. Once the king goes to G4, you can play G6 after that. So there is no rush. D5. Okay, guys, I think you misunderstand something regarding the end games, and maybe we should focus on end games at our future webinars. D5 for black, what's the point? No, D5 I think is a drawish move. I think you can even lose after D5. So you mean the exchange of the queens? Of the rooks here. Okay, take this move first. King where? D6 or C6? No, let's say this. No, this so I think G4 is a mistake because I shouldn't prevent the king's invasion. So King D4 right away. King D6, F3, G6. Well, it is a draw. I can just stay with my king. No, okay, let me play F4 to not let you go to E5, and then I'll stay with my king. So take, then what? Well, if you play G5, I can play F5, and after king C6, it's a Zugzwang. None can progress. The white king cannot go there because of the pass pawn, but black has no progress. If you play f5 in this position, it's easier. After h4, this king invades the enemy territory, chases the king away from d5, and it's losing for black. So here, I don't know if you have to do this 7 steps evaluation. Maybe you have. And at one stage you can decide, not on the first stage, but on one of the stages, you can decide that not exchanging the queens is more beneficial. How do I decide that exchanging the queens isn't favorable for white at all? What I see, the pawn structure. They play c5, and with c5, they create a passed pawn. So let's say I don't take, then c4. Maybe I take, but then it's king coming closer, b4, and there will be the outside pass pawn, which will distract pieces. While white can hardly create a passed pawn. Well, they can, but it takes many more tempi, while black already did with his c5. So that's why probably white can still hold the position, but their task is only to defend. If you do this 7-step evaluation process that I'm teaching, so well, I think there was a webinar devoted to this topic, but it's also covered in one of my Chessable courses, Evaluate Before You Calculate. And I also explained it in at our group lessons. We do group lessons on Mondays and Fridays. So at one of these lessons, I explained this topic. So if you remember, there are 7 criteria, and the first one is material. Here, material is equal. The second one is whether there are any immediate threats. Looks like there is only one threat that black wants to play. It's exchange the queens and take on e4. But we can parry it by moving the queen somewhere because our rook is still protecting it. And there is the third one, the position of the kings. So here, what do you think about the kings? The white king is actually relatively safe. The h3 can be attacked, but just g4 and it's protected by the rook. So it's not clear what black should do in order to attack the white king. For white, it's clear they should open the position or invade the enemy territory with the queen. And then this king is in danger. And if that happens, nobody cares about the passed pawns. It's more, the character of the game will be more related to the position of the king, and well, black will try to save the king, white will try to open its position and bring the pieces to attack it. So and this is actually where you can stop your evaluation and decide, okay, white has much better attacking potential. That's why he'd better keep the queens on the board. That's why let's make a move with the queen. Well, king f3, king f3, they can capture on h3 first. And after queen f7, retreat the queen back. But even if they just do so, can they play c5? Queen c2 makes sense. In the game, it was played this move, threatening with queen d4. And queen goes there. So rook h8, g4, queen goes to c4. How would you continue in this position? Well, f3. Yeah, but how would you play for a win? You can play f3, but what's the purpose? To move the rook away? With f3, you weaken the second rank also. So queen a2, you have to consider these checks. But I think they are more likely to play something like this, or maybe even something like that, rook a8, once you do f3. So I think actually, yes, f3, it will be something like that. How to play for a win. Looks like you cannot open the enemy king's position, but you should. Otherwise, you'd better exchange the queens. So targeting c6, interesting. But how? With queen d2, rook c3? Probably. Okay, let's discuss it. So let's say you first protect, they play rook a1, and then you play queen d2. Rook a6, rook c3. Queen has to move where, let's say, e6. You can play queen d5, but I'm not sure about it. So you can play this move attacking b5, but queen e5 then. However, let's talk about queen d5. I think it can be still this, or just queen e5 is enough. But then you can invade the enemy camp. Okay, it's interesting. Okay, what if he takes? Pawn takes and just king d7. This time the d pawn becomes a passed pawn, but with the rooks on the board, I think white can easily draw the game. I don't think white can win, but white can draw. That's why if you decide to keep the queens on the board and attack the enemy king, you should open his position by doing a4. e5 is too optimistic. What happens then? If they take, you take, and there is the a file open. If you want, you can double the rooks. You can play b5. You have a lot of options. So, for example, king b7. Then still queen d1. Well, rook a3 works, but then queen e4. So, but maybe they can deliver a perpetual check. I'm not sure. So king h2. Yeah, there is a perpetual check. So something like that. And there are checks here. Maybe king h2 and queen here. And yeah, there is also perpetual check. So rook a3 leads to a perpetual check. Queen a4, king b7. What you have to do, maybe e5, maybe f3, maybe king g, no. King g3, rook a8 already. Maybe this move first. Because queen b4 is a blunder. d6 is hanging. The king goes back. Maybe instead of queen a4, queen e1. Okay, so king b7, and you can do it with your rook, because while your queen is covering the back rank, king g1 and no checks, and you can invade the enemy territory. It should be a winning position then. So that's why they don't take, they take on b4. But we still are able to open the files for us to invade the enemy territory. Queen b. Well, if pawn takes, I think it's too risky. Queen takes. But rook b3. You sacrifice the pawn with white pieces here, but you should understand that even if black does his super best moves, you still have a draw, because with such a king, at the very least there should be a perpetual check or some perpetual threats that your opponent would have to defend against and repeat the position. Queen a6 was played in the game. Well, queen c4, is it better? I don't know. Queen b1 I would play. So that's why I think queen a6 is more helpful. At least it covers this. Queen d4, centralizing the queen. Rook e8. Rook b1 covering the back rank. And rook e5. So it looks quite solid. Well, this is where white made a mistake. They played queen to b4, but they could play queen c3. Queen c3, and if this happens, then queen b3, and you're attacking in both directions. But they played queen b4, and this is a problem because there is queen b5 move. Because now exchanging the queens, being down a pawn is likely to lead to a loss. So queen e1, queen goes there, rook b4, defending, and c5, attacking the rook. Rook goes to a4, then c4, breaking the connection and advancing the pawn. But the king is still in a danger. So c4 is actually kind of an accuracy already. Queen e1, queen takes a4, but after king h2, they can check here, but then king g1 and no more checks. That's why they prefer to keep the queen on the light squares and played rook b5. Attacking there, check, king g1, queen e1, another repetition. And because black thought that they are ahead, they decided to not exchange, to not repeat the position, but advance his pawns further. Rook e8, queen b4, and king g2. So black still is a little ahead, but the problem is that they have to play accurately. They have to play moves that doesn't allow white to attack, while white's attacking potential is definitely obvious. So, for example, what do you think? How black should play here?
Why do you say that white's potential is so much better here?
Well, because of the invasion into the enemy camp with such moves like Queen a6, Rook a7. Even doing this makes a lot of sense.
So you're just saying the king's more exposed and they're
Yeah, the king is more exposed. That's why white has a lot of winning opportunities if only black makes a mistake. But if black plays like the engine or like a very strong grandmaster with a lot of time to calculate all these threats and find the only moves, then yes, black can still play for a win.
but black has this huge advantage of a double connected pass pawn. It's pretty far advanced.
Yes, if only the king is safe, then these pawns will provide black with advantage, which is enough to win the game. But right now, they cannot win because of that. And actually, well, okay, maybe you will tell me how they should play. Yeah, so good point from John. For a human, the black's position is on a knife's edge. Just one simple mistake. So Brian, rook b1, you mean rook b8 probably. Rook b8 makes sense. So rook b8, queen checks, and then rook b7. So if you do queen b7, you make a serious mistake because they can deliver a check and then play rook a7. So queen c6, then another check. And then what? So king c8, queen f8. If queen d7, it's rook a7. You have to play very accurately. Rook b8, yeah, queen a7, and you have to move the king. Then it can be queen a6, then queen a6. So you have to, well, if here you decide to block, then you have to play properly here, not queen d7 because it's just a blunder. Okay, yeah, rook b8 would help. c3 is probably the best option. c3, rook e8, king escapes, but it's very hard to calculate it. And then there is a perpetual check with queen a3. They cannot escape. So if something like that, it's this. Because after c1 equals queen, it's simply queen a7 and queen a7. So these two moves. And the repetition. So if, for example, this, and this, then I think it's possible to deliver another check and repeat the position king a4, king a7. Okay, fine. So c3 would lead to a perpetual check, but c3 would be quite aggressive. Instead, they played queen c5 to prepare c3, right? What did they miss? So if rook a7 check, then probably rook b7 makes sense. Yeah, they missed this idea of queen c a6 to threaten rook a7, to threaten queen c8, as well as rook c8. So how to play? Well, c3, then we can take the queen at least. But probably c3 was the best move. They played rook b8. Rook a7. The king has to go to the back rank, or they have to sacrifice the queen, but without queen, without this queen, it's losing. So king d8, rook g7, threatening with queen f6. So queen b6, offer an exchange. What would you play for white? Check with a rook. What's the point? So you can check rook g8, but king c7. Queen e4 makes sense, but queen e4, just queen e6, cementing the position. I'm not allowing you to play rook g8 then. Queen e3, that's right. Queen e3 is a better move. How does it work? Well, queen e7 is a threat. Queen f8 is a threat. If you decide to play so, then it's queen a7, threatening with 2 checkmates. If you decide to, well, what else you can do? No, there is nothing else that works. So queen a3, and after king c8, it's queen f8. How does it work? Queen f8, check, and queen c5, they forced to sacrifice the queen, and then it's checkmate. So this is how black lost the game. So, well, this strategy with a4 was absolutely correct, sacrificing the pawn in order to expose the king. This was good, but here, queen b4 was a mistake. Instead, queen c3, keeping pressure. Okay, let me take a note. G6 isn't enough, isn't a safe square because all the light squares are open, and if, let's say, there is an attack from behind, the king can be in a trouble even there. Even if, well, the queen occupies the back rank and goes to h5, there can be checkmate with queen h5, so g6 is not safe.
So let me just ask you: is there a safe square for the king if black
No,
had
I
all the
don't
time
think
in the
so.
world?
No, you always have to think about how you defend the king with pieces, with rooks, with rook and queen. There is no such square where you can say that, okay, I can do everything with my rook and queen, but the king will stay there, and it will be safe. No, there is no such position.
Sorry to push the point, but why? What makes white's safety so much better? The pawn on f2.
The king's position. So these
Like, what about the
attacks
pawn?
are limited.
Uh-huh.
So because of the pawn structure, yes, because of the pawn on f2, but not the pawn on f2 alone, because of the pawn on e4 as well. The black king is not closed like that, so there are open files, and there is a possibility to invade the enemy territory even diagonally. Right, so even if there was the h file open, then bringing the queen to e5 in the beginning and the rook on h8 would guarantee an attack for black, but no, there are even no h pawn to play this exchange and then do so. Okay, fine. So we are not finishing yet. We have more games to analyze. However, if, well, you know, these workshops and our webinars before are absolutely free. However, if you want to donate, you can use this link and this button. So let me copy the link to the chat. So if you want to support my work, if you like it, there is a link. It works easily. So you click this button, then you enter the amount you want to donate, like 10, 20, even 5. Then you click on this button and it redirects you to PayPal and your account. Then you enter and send the money automatically to my account. Well, this helps me to prepare content better, and this is how I can save time and plan everything for our future events. Okay, so people are leaving. However, we still have material to continue. So the link is here in the chat. Also, this event is recorded and is recording, and once it's over, well, I think tomorrow I'm going to send you the link to the recording so you can watch it if you want. Okay, let's continue. We have one more game to analyze. I'll share the screen again. Okay, this. Well, I don't know the white player, but for black, it was a famous Bulgarian grandmaster, Kirill Georgiev. What can you say? What should we do in this position? Should we try to exchange the queens and try to attack the pawn? So, for example, queen b2, queen takes, knight takes, then there is a pawn lost. What do you think? Or not? Yeah, so I remember that you want to talk about the openings. However, yes, I'm going to cover such a topic, but not, well, not on the next workshop. Well, by the way, what can I say? Well, there will be no workshop next Sunday. Because of my vacation, I'm going for a trip to Uruguay just for a week or for 6 days. But there will be a webinar the Sunday after that. So no webinar on the 26th of January, but then on the 26th, yes, but on the 2nd of February, there will be a webinar, so don't worry. Okay, so let's take a look at your suggestion. So yes, exchanging of the queens appears good. It leads to passed pawns. So let's talk about it. This, well, they take, we take, then this is hanging, what they can do. Most likely they'll try to attack our pawns, but I'm not sure what should we do first. Probably knight c6. Knight c6, then what? If knight a4, it looks fine. The b pawn is stopped. That's why maybe a5, because a6, it's knight before double attack, so a5. However, then knight e7. You can win this pawn, but then your knight is tied down to the pawn on b6, so I'm not sure if black is winning. So moving the king, but how? Again, it's so many tempo consuming procedure. So no, looks like yes, we can we can exchange the queens, then capture on a4, but all these doesn't lead to a winning position. Also, after queen b2, queen f5 looks dangerous. I agree. Change knight, b pawn will be very dangerous. Change the knights, the b pawn. So you want to play like that. Yeah, but the king is exposed. So again, queen f5, queen f6, isn't there a perpetual check? Okay, Johnny wants the PGNs of today's games. Okay. A5. Okay, so what can I say? Again, if you do the evaluation process, here you definitely see that black is better. Because of what? Well, because of several factors. First of all, this king is in more danger than this king. But of course, you have to keep an eye on this, queen f5. And you may have a potential of a pawn, of a pass pawn on the queen side. But not exchanging the queens makes a lot of sense because you, with your queen and knight, can create a lot of winning combinations. They also can do the same, but it's black to move, and this makes a big difference. So queen e1, check, king h2 is a must, and now knight d2. So you don't allow your opponent to continue with this move. Why? Well, because you're threatening with this. Oh, let me just illustrate the concept. Even if it's not queen e5, knight f1, the king cannot go there. It has to go somewhere else. And then you can play knight e3. And if the queen is here, you still win it. So that's why white has to defend. How does white have to defend in this position? You also threaten to take the pawn on f2. Well, h3, you mean h4? h4, but it's this move, and I'm threatening to win a queen by doing a discovered attack. Okay, with knight d3, exactly. With knight d3, this is the only way to defend. But queen e2, and the knight is tied down to this pawn. The queen is tied down to the knight's defense. And well, what we are going to do? This is actually the biggest question. They play king h1. Why so? Well, because it's hard to suggest a move. Okay, so if it's something else like queen c3, how can you continue? Well, you can deliver a check, but the king goes back and you have to go back. So it doesn't make much sense. But you can play knight f4 and then maybe take there. So queen c3 is risky. That's why king h1. Well, they can go g3. No, they cannot. If only they play such a move, they lose the game quickly. First of all, knight f3, and after king h1, it's quick checkmate. If they play king g2, which makes a lot of sense, just queen d3 wins the game. So queen takes, and it's a fork. That's why g3 definitely no. And g4 also doesn't work. Also, the problem here is that at the moment, there is a threat of a discovered attack. So that's the main reason why they played such a move. How should we continue in this position? Well, this is a question too. Yes, the knight on c4 is an outpost. That's right. So it's technically, according to the definition, it is outpost. Knight e4, yeah, knight e4, but then we lose a queen. Okay, so looks like we cannot continue with the attack. The attack is stopped. But white doesn't have any moves, to be honest. They are in a zogged one. Well, that's why we can do what we want. And because of 2 versus 1 on the queen side, let's create a passed pawn. Now what to play? Well, h4 was played in the game, which seems to be the only move. What else can we try? Well, f pawn moves loses here. Well, maybe there is something else, but at least only 3. The g pawn move loses with a checkmate. Queen checks, king h2, knight f3, checkmate. A queen move, but where? The queen has to go to the square where the knight is still protected, so it's only c3. And it fails. You can do that. He goes there, and you do this discovered attack. And moreover, you can take this pawn. Yeah, you can take this pawn first, then repeat the position again, and this time go to g3. Why to g3? Well, not because you want to play queen h1. So queen h1 here completely fails because your knight is under attack. You play knight e2, threatening the queen and threatening to deliver checkmate. How they can defend? With this move only, which means you can take the knight. So seems like h4 is the only move. But how does it work? So you can continue with g4. You can continue with almost anything. Black decided to play this. Then what? If this, then g4. If, well, actually, if this, it's actually queen takes. So h takes g5, h takes g5, and this is where they resigned. Well, it's absolutely equal position. There are no mating threats, but white resigned because they just don't have any moves. Everything that they do loses material and then the game. How? Well, e4, d takes e4. Well, queen c3 loses because of the same strategy that I illustrated. The knight move loses this pawn. Let's say this. Yeah, I think it's better to check first and then take this pawn, threatening with knight f1 or knight f3. Queen c7 for perpetual. Queen c7. Okay, interesting. Hoping to play queen e5 and do there is no perpetual check. Queen d3. I do this and I go there. So no more checks. Queen g5. Check. Check. King h3 and queen g6. So if you take this, well, with queen e6, I can exchange the queens at least. And this is a winning position because of a pawn majority on the queen side. Well, maybe it's the simplest way. What else do I have? Well, no, I think it's the best that I can do. Queen g6. Well, queen e4. Queen e4 works. If this king goes here, if you repeat the position, now I can block, but it's basically the same. My king is just a little closer to the place of action. Queen e6, and it's queen h6 this time. And if this move, I have queen e3. Nice. No, okay, I didn't see it. When I initiated this original combination, I was hoping on such move like queen e6, offering a queen exchange, and then capturing this pawn and promoting. So no, there is no perpetual check, and you cannot play queen c7. Fine. That's why they just lost the game and resigned here. So what can I say? How to take a decision whether you should exchange the queens or not? Well, you should consider what your queen can do comparing to what you can, well, what you can do with the queen comparing to what you are going to do if you exchange the queens. If you see that you have better chances to win with without queens on the board, then exchange them. But if you see that there is the enemy king weak, or you will see that your queen interacts with your other pieces pretty well, then keep the queens on the board. Well, in order to do so, you can do this 7-step evaluation process when you take a decision regarding the position based on, well, based on 7 factors, 7 criteria. Fine. Anyway, so I'm going to send this recording for you tomorrow. I hope today the topic was quite clear. If you see that the enemy king is weaker than yours, then keeping the queens on the board is more favorable for you, of course, but pay attention to your king too. So this is the most decisive factor. If you, let's say, had extra material, then in order to avoid complications, exchanging the queens would also favor you. You would unlikely make any mistake to, I mean, any serious mistake to let your opponent to play for a win. Well, that's all for today. There will be no homework. It's a workshop, and it seems that you don't really like the homework. Okay, there is a question why the knights on b2, b7, g7, and g2 are bad. Well, usually because they don't participate in the place of actions there. So, for example, the knight on a8 is bad too. The knight from b7, well, is bad because, well, it can go to d6 only. Other squares are not so attractive. But sometimes, for example, in Nimza Indian, you can play knight a5, exchange the bishops, and then bring the knight to b7. However, you mainly play such a strategy because you want to get rid of the bishops. You think, well, that exchanging this bishop is more favorable, while the position of the knight can be improved. The knights on the edges of the board are also quite bad. I had a webinar devoted to such a topic. And yes, you can move the knight to the edge, and it may be not a mistake. It can be even the strongest move, but you should understand that the knight on the edge is doing something concrete, like threatening the bishop, performing certain functions, but it is located there temporarily. This is what you need to know. Fine. So we are done for today. Thank you for coming. If you want to donate, you're welcome. You saw the link. And see you in 2 weeks. There will be an announcement. So, and those of you who participate in our group classes, there will be a class tomorrow. So I am also going to provide you with a test for the first half of our course. I'll send it as a PGN as well as create an interactive study on Lichess. Okay. Thank you for coming and see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.